Hello, everybody. This is Rob Fredette with the podcast Hodgepod, and welcome back. Another episode. We're going in a different direction on this episode, and I'm looking forward to it. Joining me on Hodgepod is Ann Riley. Ann has worked in technology, manufacturing, finance, banking, and business systems. Right, and Ann has also developed a theory known as the Ideasphere. I think I said that correctly. I hope I did. Ideasphere. See, I can't even say it.
That's okay.
Tongue twister. It explores the parallels between human and ecological systems. And Ann Riley, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I am just delighted to be here.
Great, thank you. So, first of all, I'd like to have my guests introduce themselves and just give an introduction of yourself, and we'll talk about your books and the human evolution and ecological system and all that information, because this is going to be fun.
Okay, well, great. So I was born in Washington State, and I'm one of 12 children. There are 6 boys and 6 girls in my family, and I am number 11. So the good news is I always had playmates. The bad news is I got drilled with a football quite a bit as a kid. So, but I grew up, my dad's a nuclear scientist, so we grew up sort of valuing thinking as sort of a, kind of a way to see the world.
Mhm.
And what struck me when I went to Catholic school and learned about evolution, which did happen in the 60s, I was really struck by the fact that we evolved. I could see when I was just 10 years old that, yep, we evolved. We look like, other creatures. We have eyes and feet, and, but we acted very differently. And I just couldn't make sense of it. It just felt like we couldn't just be so different. So I just spent a life of time of thinking that we had to be connected and there had to be a logical connection between how nature worked and we worked. I just didn't know it. So I read about science and majored in business and kind of did all these things. And I read a few books along the way that really struck me as, oh, there is a link here, but I couldn't quite see it. So one of the most important books I read was Bionomics, which was a book by Michael Rothschild, and it was written in 1991. And in that book, he linked biological systems to human economic systems. And like he looked at the operations of a cell and he looked at the operations in a factory and he says, see, these are parallel. They work the same way. And it was brilliant. And he had a lot of brilliant stuff in this book. And he set out a path for me to think about humans a different way. But the big hole in the book was that, well, if human economic systems are like biology, then humans themselves must be like biology. We must be. But where is that book? And I was like, that's the book I want to read. And I was absolutely sure that people would read Rothschild's book and say, oh, here's the hole, and they would write this book. And 30 years later, I was still waiting for it. So it was COVID time, and I was like, I'm going to write the book I've been waiting for. So I researched and researched, and I basically figured out the patterns and the parallel relationship that Rothschild laid out between economic systems and biological systems. I kind of figured out that if those work, it has to be the same set of patterns. And I kind of defaulted through and created this theory. And the more I kind of looked at it, the more it made all kinds of sense. And then I wrote this book and kind of, I could lay it all out, and it fits. It works.
That's amazing. And first of all, how was it growing up, the 11th of 12 children? My wife grew up in a family of 7, and she was the youngest. I grew up with my brother and myself. What's it like growing up in a family with 12 children? Because that must be a lot of competition.
Oh my gosh. I figured out when I was pretty little and first could do math that I didn't have to say a word until I was 15. Because by then, when I was 5, the 12 kids were born only 14 years apart. So every year a kid would go away to college and never come back. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to say anything till I'm the last kid left. There's only going to be two of us left, my little sister and me. And then they'll say, "Oh, there you are." Yeah, you know. But it was good. I was a little bit intimidated by that big family because they're amazing people and they're wonderful and they're full of life. And I was a little bit like, whoa, this is too much for me. So I was kind of a kid who went and hid in my room and read books.
That's great stuff. Human evolution has come a long way, from way back when, but like in the last 40 years, it's really come a long way. I remember seeing 8-track tapes and vinyl records and then turning over to CDs 30 years ago, then the cell phone coming in a little bit
Right.
in the 90s, and then 20 years ago we had the flip phone, which was like a status symbol, and then music
Hmm.
streaming. And it's amazing as time has evolved, we went from listening to vinyl records and listening to other things, and now we have everything in our phone. It's like a computer, which it is, podcasts, music.
Right.
Isn't that amazing, like, how we have evolved over time and just, like,
Yeah.
you have a wall on the back of
Yes.
your set there, and I see one there, "I am still learning," Michelangelo, and,
Yes. One
I
of my
work in
favorites.
and I work in a field where I learn every day, and I learn every day new things, but it's amazing how we've evolved as a human race.
Well, this is the one of the major points of my book is that human ideas, what makes humans different is our ability to think, our ability to create ideas. Now, when you think about it, ideas don't have any physical representation, right?
Mhm,
They're just an idea in our just that we conjure up that doesn't really exist. It only exists when we put it in some physical form, right? And so, like you said, when we talk about communication, you talked about 8-track tapes. Let's go back to the beginning and talk about writing and words and then
mhm.
writing and then books and then the printing press. And those are all things that we use. People had ideas about how to communicate. And then once you can put it in a physical form, people can share it. And when people share it, they add their own ideas, they change it, they delete some stuff. Obviously books aren't dead yet, but people they still read the content of books. They just don't read it from a paper source anymore. They read it from an iPad or they listen to an audiobook. So the ideas change form. They evolve just like DNA forms do. And that is what I call the ideasphere. That's what I call we've created a new ecosystem of human ideas that lays on top of our physical ecosystem. We still live, our bodies still are part of the physical system that live in the world. But now we have all these ideas that we can use to change the world around us. And that's what we've done. And we are the only species who's been able to do that. And you can tell, just look around you, everything that we have created comes from an idea. And we have, vastly changed our world. Sometimes it's been good and sometimes it's not so good. And I think right now we're coming up into a place where we're really having to consider whether, you know, climate change is going to be a problem, the potential for nuclear annihilation is going to be a problem. These are things we have to consider now because humans, when we built this ability or when we created this ability to think, we broke some of the rules that nature actually uses to collaborate together. And we've broken those rules. And now we're kind of like, oh, we should consider those things. But we don't have the context because we haven't really thought about it that way.
You mentioned nuclear annihilation. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we had the Cold War, but that was a deterrence between the United States and the Soviet Union. But
Right.
you never heard talk about nuclear. And now these days, you're hearing about this, and it's like, where's this talk coming from? And who are these people talking about this? Doesn't make any sense.
In what way does it not make sense?
It's just like it was just never talked about like in the news now. Now it's like nuclear,
Mm,
you'll hear starting to hear nuclear chatter a little bit,
right.
which is kind of a little anxiety about it. That I guess
Yes.
that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say.
Well, I grew up in Eastern Washington, where they built some of the materials for the nuclear bomb that was used in World War II. And so we did atomic drills like people do fire drills in school.
Mhm.
And I am pretty sure that I learned from being in school that if I hide on my desk, the radiation won't get me. So
Yeah.
it's like, what? But no, I think the thing is we're understanding that we have the ability to destroy the world, or destroy us. I don't think we'll destroy all of life forms, but we do have that ability, and we need to stop and think about it. And what I try to do in my book is say, look, when a when an animal forms and it changes, right? People like obviously everything evolves, right? And as animals evolve, if the changes that occur do not match with the environment or the existing systems that already exist in that animal, the animal will not survive. It won't. But
Mhm.
humans have, with their ideas, have much more freedom. We can come up with a bad idea just as much as a good idea. It doesn't have to be a right idea. It doesn't have to fit. It just needs people to accept it. So if people accept that the sky is green, and everybody accepts it and lives that way, then that becomes a truth, even though it's not true. And I think we're living with that, the consequences of people believing things that aren't true and then using them to move forward. And that can only go so far before things start to break. I mean, if you have President Trump saying gas prices are going down and you go every day and look at the gas prices going up and up and up and up, something's going to break. It doesn't fit. But we can keep those dichotomies alive a lot longer than nature. Nature's just like, nope, you don't fit, you're out. And that's why nature's been really successful at collaborations. And what I call by collaborations is bodies in nature are very successful, whereas our equivalent societies are not nearly as successful. And so I looked at why our societies aren't as, filled with people, aren't as successful as bodies filled with cells. And when I looked at those, I said, ooh, we can learn a lot from the rules that cells use. We have to adjust for the fact that we can think. But if we do that, we would make very different decisions about how we exist in societies if we use the guide that we have from nature.
You had mentioned about a bad idea. Sometimes when people work on items and they work on inventions and ideas, there's some failure, and then there's tweaking, and then there's enhancing. It's come a long way. I forgot to mention AI. You can put a topic in on your phone. You can get it in 5 seconds. You can get an elaborate readout of what you want to read about. And
Mhm,
it's amazing. I like doing research. I like,
mhm.
going through a book. I like going online and doing it myself rather than use AI. But it's amazing when you could pull up a thing. Who are the 10 greatest all-time NBA players? It's going to give you it in 5 seconds who the 10 greatest and that's how we've evolved to
Right.
the good, but there is some bad that could be involved in that as well.
Right, right. Well, and what you described is that sort of changing and modification and evolution is exactly how nature does it. It's exactly the same pattern, but nature's just really slow at it, right? Because they have to wait for the DNA to accumulate inside a cell, inside a body, to make a change. But we are lightning fast because we don't have to wait for DNA. We could just choose which ideas we want to work on and start working on them. We could collaborate together. We could do all kinds of things. And so, on one side, we're amazing. I mean, look at some of the things we can do. But on the other side, we're dangerous because look at some of the things we've done, you know? And what I wanted to do was have people start understanding at least the context in which we live, and then understanding that if you want to make better societies, we have to choose different ways of moving forward. And what I would say in nature, the way so just a bit of review is your body is made up of cells. Your cells are the living unit of the world. And your body is made up of 35 trillion cells. And that is a community. It is a society. And they all work together, and they work together with some very basic functions. But the main idea that they accomplish is that the basic rule is, hey, cells, you get to do what you want, but you can't hurt any of the other cells in the body. Because if you hurt the other cells in the body, then the whole body gets in trouble. So you can't do that. You can do all your other stuff, but you can't do that. Well, if that were the same goal that we had as societies, our governments, which are the equivalent of a brain in a body, our governments would create rules that say, hey, people, maximize your choice. That's what you like to do. You like to be choosers, choose away. But guess what? You can't hurt the other people in your society, because when you do, it damages all of us. But we don't make our rules that way. That's not how our laws are made.
Mhm.
Because if we did, we wouldn't have laws against gay marriage, or we would have laws against or regulating guns, because guns harm people. We'd be like, wait, what are we doing? These harm people. We need to put in regulations so people can figure out how to have a gun, but not shoot people with it. Let's figure that out. And that's the job of government. But that's not the way we do it, because we don't understand this context.
That was fascinating. We just explained that. That was amazing. I'm looking at your back wall there. There's a few other ones.
Oh,
I love it. So the one I like is be kind whenever possible. It is always possible. The Dalai Lama said that, and
yeah,
it doesn't cost anything to be kind to people. And I think nowadays, a lot of people are angry out there. Like,
right.
you can't do anything without somebody getting angry or impatient.
Mhm,
Just a little kindness, paying it forward would
mhm,
probably trigger somebody to go pay it forward to somebody else. And I think
right,
that's if we had more kindness, I think this
right,
would be a better world. Nobody listens to each other anymore. It's all you did this, and you can't even get politicians to sit in the same room together anymore. 20, 30 years ago, you could probably. They
right,
hate each other, they could
right.
compromise. You can't even get that now.
Right. Well, and I think one of the things is, again, nature works. They don't have the concept of kind in nature. What they do is say, look it, you just don't hurt each other. Just don't hurt each other, because if you hurt each other, that's an action you take that we can measure, we can see, and we can say, nope, you're not going to do it. We'll send in our police and our little army, and we're gonna take care of you. You're either going to shape up and fly right, or you're not going to. But we as people don't have that same concept of saying, you know what? You can have an opinion. It doesn't hurt me for you to have your opinion, or somebody's annoying you. It doesn't hurt me to have you being annoying. I might have to choose how to distance myself from you. But where the line should be drawn is, you can't harm anybody. So just because you're mad at somebody's opinion doesn't mean you can deck them. You know, it
Mhm.
doesn't mean you can hit them. And if you do, you're subject to the law that says you can't harm people. So if we all kind of lived with that idea in mind, it's very much, I live my life this way. It's so much easier. I can just sort things out and be like, oh, that's okay. They're just having their opinion, and it's not going to hurt me. Some opinions are dangerous, especially when you're talking about children and bullying, and some really dangerous words really are dangerous. And I would say one thing that I don't talk about very much, but speech itself, the freedom of speech that we talk about, has changed over years. When we talked about the freedom of speech back in the day, when
Mhm.
the guys wrote the Constitution, the most people could speak was they went and put an article in the paper, or they could get up on their soapbox and make a speech, and that was about it. But now speech today turns into a physical form. We are here making a physical recording of our discussion, which then lives on its own and can be modified and can be used to evolve other ideas.
Mhm.
So speech is a different thing than it used to be. And I think we really need to start thinking about when we regulate the physical results of speech without actually regulating the ability to have those thoughts and to have those ideas out there. I think it's really important that we start looking at things like social media and how that affects people, and what if any regulations are on, not on the speech, but on the consequences of the speech, on what happens with that speech. So my idea, and I put this in an appendix, I talk about social media, was that you got to let people say what they want to say on social media, but they've also got to decide and say out loud whether it's true or not true. So that if I post my dog is the cutest dog in the world, I have to also say, that's my opinion. It's not a fact, you know? But if I say the 2020 election was rigged, I have to say, that's my opinion. It's not a fact. It's not true. You have to be accountable to your words. Nature is full of accountability. We have a social media world in which people are not being accountable for their words. And that I think is causing trouble.
Yeah, I grew up. I took journalism in college many years ago, 40 years ago, and I was both sides, two sides to every story. Give one side, the other side, and I still have that thing when I read today or if I listen to shows. I listen to both sides or watch TV just to see who's saying what. But now it's gotten to the point you said social media, everything has got amplified and people just
Mhm.
do it for clickbait. They just do it for clickbait and just to make
Right.
money. They're grifters.
Right. And that's where we have to understand the consequences of that, that there's a lot of people who literally do not understand what truth is. And they just we haven't taught them, you when you took a journalism class, you had to talk about what's true,
Mhm.
what's a source, what is a thing you can report as true versus a thing you can report as, oh, that's not true. This person says this. You learn that. There's a lot of kids these days who do not understand that distinction. And we need to do a better job of educating kids, but also we need to understand the consequences of some of these actions and try to mitigate the harm where it exists.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. You mentioned the power of ideas. Recently, they just had the Artemis 2 go up around the moon there for the first time on the dark side of the moon. And now we have electric cars, AI, streaming, medicine technology for medical purposes. You know,
Mhm.
the robots can do surgery now. I guess that's that idea, what we can do to evolve. You think that would help out with probably people being how would I say this? Being receptive or being thankful we have these things in our lives here in the United States where other countries don't have. You think people would just be thankful for what we have and get along?
I really thought about this a lot since I've written my book because, you know, what struck me is that nature works very simply. They all work together and they all collaborate so that their primary goal is to survive. And they can either compete on their own like little tiny one-celled organisms, or they can collaborate together in these elaborate bodies, and they also compete at that body level. But they collaborate and they they have as their basic goal to survive. Well, but humans have come along and we don't have mere survival as our goal. And so I kept thinking, what is our goal if it's not mere survival? And I finally have come up with, at least I think in America, and probably if it's infected all over the world, is that what really is our goal as humans is wealth accumulation. What we have decided is the most important thing is to make money. And if you look around, everything has been infected by money and the power that comes from having great wealth. Our elections now, we have corporate. It's with the Citizens United decision, corporations can put millions and millions of dollars in to elect people that again, those few people who get elected are the leaders who make the rules about how we all coordinate together, how we all live together. But instead of us all voting the way it's supposed to be designed and have an equal voice, these decisions have come along to allow people with a lot of money to game the system for their own purposes.
Mhm.
So now you have them basically purchasing the leaders to facilitate their desire to get more money and create even more social inequality. And the way I would say it is like this. The founders of the Constitution, they wanted one person, one vote, right? And we know that if money's involved, if I have $10, I can speak with a certain voice. If I have $10 billion, my voice is huge.
Mhm.
That's no longer equal representation. It's no longer one person, one vote. Now you've got money infected in the system where 1/10 of 1% have 90% of the voice. That's not how it was intended to be, and that is not right, and that's why I think we've gotten into so much trouble. Money is at the root of most of our systems, and the profit maximization is drives the goals that we would have. If you're making a widget and it is cheaper to use an inferior quality of a material, and you then kill somebody, that's no longer a goal as long as you're making profit. And if you just have to pay off the lawyers or pay off the person, and that's what will win, that is not a good. It is the system we use. It is a system of dominance, and it is a short-term system of living, but it is not a survival mechanism. We will not survive in the long term if that's our goal. It doesn't work. We are so unequal that in the end, the systems will break.
Mhm. You have this wall with all these quotes. What made you come up with that wall? I find that pretty awesome.
Oh, there's a lot of people in the world who came along before I did and are a lot smarter than me. And so these people spoke to me and kind of reminded me I wanted to keep this close and say, like, oh, I want to remember, what this person said or what this person said, about something so that I would, I don't know, keep myself level or I just be aware of how big the world is and how many different opinions there are and try to just do my best every day. It's kind
Yeah,
of a motivator for me.
I like the one you have another one, "Be quick, don't hurry," John Wood, and I like that one.
John Wooden was a fantastic person. And, can't you imagine when you play sports, the difference between hurrying frantically or being quick and with your mind about you? Oh, it was brilliant. I was like, oh yeah, that's going up.
Yeah, being quick is probably thinking about what you're gonna do. Hurrying is just, like, trying to get something done just to get it done. I like that. That's a
Right,
that's a great way. And let's
right.
see, there's another one back there. Is it
Oh, where
Kingsley
is it?
Ames?
Uh,
"More will mean
worse.
worse." Yeah, okay.
Yes. And that one is kind of where the idea of profit maximization being a problem. More will mean worse, because profits by themselves are not a bad thing. They are a feedback mechanism to say, hey, your customers like you. They like your products. They like what you're doing. You're gaining some extra money. That's a sign that you're doing well. But if you do everything to make a profit at all costs and forget about your customers or forget about quality or forget about, the goals you tried to achieve by having people use this product, it diminishes the the whole society, you know, and that's where I think we are. I think we've got everybody trying so hard to get as much as they can from everything they can that they're missing the joy of life, the purpose they have in making that company in the beginning or providing that service.
You know, just recently this week, we're taping this episode, Spirit Airlines went out of business
Yes,
because of the jet fuel prices.
right,
And both sides are going at each other saying, you didn't do this or they didn't do this. And no one talked about the 17,000 people who lost their jobs. Not one
right,
person I heard on television. It was all about you did this or you did that. But here, 17,000 people lost their jobs, families, school, paying for
right.
child's tuition. And it's like, what are these people going to do now with this, with the airline industry?
Yeah, and this is a hard situation because you know, nothing lasts forever. In nature, things, I mean, the dinosaurs died out, things die out and businesses die out here, but you got to look low at a deeper level. So the whole point of the airline industry is is how do we get from one place to the other? How do we transport people efficiently and well? And what happened is Spirit Airlines was an innovator, right? They did a la carte pricing, and they were said, oh, we're just gonna, bottom, we're just gonna let people choose what they want, right? People like to choose. You can choose. You can carry on your luggage and get the worst seat in the house, and it's cheap. And people responded. And what happened is all the other airline industries did what every industry does. They said, "Oh, well, we can do that too." And so Spirit was already getting priced out because customers were making those choices on other airlines too. And the thing is Spirit couldn't keep their model going with the prices the way they were. They couldn't. So in those situations, you got to let them go. They didn't make it. And the people, what you have, this is where the role of government is to create a system where people can transition to other jobs. And that means unemployment insurance. That
Mm.
means healthcare insurance that keeps them afloat until they can figure out what to do next. Because nobody is ever guaranteed a job, especially in this country. Now, if we were, I think, did better job and made better decisions about healthcare and housing prices and education and all these other things, then where people would be like, oh, it doesn't matter if I lost my job. I still have my health care. I have an unemployment thing. I can find something else or I can move over. We make that an easier way to transition, but we don't have a system like that. Everybody's like, no, we have to do it. You know, we have to. We have to have everybody pay for health care because everybody's making a profit and everybody wants to charge everybody for everything. In the Scandinavian countries, who I think do a fantastic job of creating cohesive societies, they do it. They have higher taxes, but people have fewer expenses because they don't pay for healthcare. They don't pay for education. They don't pay for childcare. They pay for rent, housing and food. And that's about it.
Mm.
And so they look at it and they go, this is a deal I like. And if you talk to people from Scandinavia, they're like, oh, we understand the deal we're making. We're good with this. We don't make those same deals here in the United States. And it makes it much harder for people to transition. And transition change is the name of the game in life. Everything changes all the time.
And it's survival of the fittest too, with companies and just getting by in everyday life. I mean, everyday life is hard, but now with prices going up and, you know, paychecks getting smaller and smaller sometimes,
Yeah,
it
but
makes it
here's the thing.
hard.
We don't have to make it be survival of the fittest. That's the whole point of collaboration. When those cells went to live in the body, when they decided not to go it alone and they collaborate, here's the decision they made or the trade-off they made. They get fed, they get free health care from the systems that are there to fight off infection and all those other things. They get fed. All they do is they do their job 24/7 and they get everything taken care of. That's how it works in a society. And we don't use that model. We've said, no, 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 that's not the model we want. We want everybody to do their own thing. And, when you're collaborating, it's really hard to treat each other well when you're also competing at such a frantic pace. And I think this is where we're running into a problem. Collaboration is way more predominant in nature than competition. 83% of all the cells in the world live in bodies. Only 17% of all the cells are single organisms. Most of them live in bodies. They collaborate. They don't compete. They didn't like to compete. They got rid of competition by joining together. And I think that that's a model that we should at least consider when we're making decisions about how we live together in societies.
While you said collaborate means to work jointly with others on a shared project, endeavor, or to achieve a common goal. It
Right.
commonly refers to cooperative efforts in creative, academic, and professional settings. It can also mean cooperating traitorously with an enemy. Wow, I didn't even know that was part of the definition. With an enemy.
Well, and look at your body. You got all kinds of poisons inside your gut that break down food. Yeah, sulfuric acid, that'll kill you if it gets out of its system, but it works for us. We've got all kinds of cells and viruses and bacteria in there that do all kinds of symbiotic efforts that have evolved over millions and millions of years that make it work. So we are it's very simplistic to say we should just compete and survival of the fittest when most of us, we are humans. The best thing we do is communicate. And in order to collaborate, you need to communicate. We are the best collaborators on the planet. If we just would let ourselves get out of our own way by sharing our ideas and understanding that, hey, we can have different ideas. We can make different choices. We just can't hurt each other. We can do that at a societal level. We could do it at a world level too if we wanted to. We just aren't there yet because we have so many other biases built into our own thinking that we are like, you know, Russians are bad or whatever. And we don't even think of the possibility that, oh, we could actually have one world society in which we all live together. And then we could work on, problems like climate change as a group and maybe accomplish something. We could do that because we all speak the same language. In nature, an elephant and a tiger cannot collaborate because they do not have any way to collaborate, right? All the cells in the tiger can work together to make the tiger work. All the cells in the elephant can make the elephant work. But the tiger and the elephant themselves have diverged like this through
Mm.
evolution, so they can't communicate. Not humans. We can communicate. We got different languages, but we can communicate. So if we can communicate, we can collaborate. If we can collaborate, we can figure out a way to go forward peacefully together.
I had a guest on 2 or 3 months ago when and she was talking about the nervous system we have in our body. Like getting in and out of our car just seems like a routine matter. We didn't even think about it, but it's our body and our cells working together. We take it so much for granted. It,
Right.
it's tremendous what our body does for us. What do you say? It's got trillions of cells in it.
Mhm.
I like to go work out at the gym, so it's amazing when you lift weights and you're doing all these classes and things like that. Your body just pumps. You feel your heart pumping. You can
Mhm.
feel like the exertion in your exercise. It's
Right.
amazing what our body does, what it does to regulate what we do when we work out or we go through a stressful situation.
Right. Right. Well, and to me, the neural system and the brain are the coordinating system. That is what the only job the brain and the neural system has to make all those cells work together. And they do all these amazing things to make them work together. 35 trillion cells is a lot of cells to work together. They are a lot. And so things are going boom, 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 boom all the time. Well, guess what? The equivalent in our human world is government. The government is our coordinating system. We give our leaders in government the power to create the rules so that we can live together. The laws are the rules. Nature doesn't need that because everybody shares the same DNA. They all have the same rules. They all have the same instructions. They all know what to do. But we have to give our leaders these powers, and then they're supposed to create the rules that we all live by. Well, they are not creating rules that say, "Hey, you guys don't harm each other." They are now right now in the way we are doing it now. They are making rules based on who gives them the most money. This is a completely messed up system and will not do well for our people or for the common good or for us building a peaceful society. This is where we have gone wrong. And this is why I advocate first and foremost that we have to take all the money out of elections and lobbying our government officials. Just has gone. If you give private citizens who are the people who have the vote, they get to give money and they get a limited amount that they can give to their candidates, and that's it. That's just it. And that way, the people who get elected are there to serve the common good. There's no other people buying them off. They serve the common good. And then our coordinating system, our government, should work more for the people and not for special interests.
I can remember. I'm old enough to remember in 1976 the bicentennial, how patriotic it was, and all the
Mhm.
great
I do
pa-
remember that. Yeah.
the pageantry behind it. I remember when the USA beat the Soviets in 1980, the patriotism.
Mhm.
What else? After the horrific events of 9/11, it was
Mhm.
patriotic. Everybody had come together. And
Mhm.
this is now the 250th year anniversary. I don't know if we're going to see that this year. I don't know. I hope we do.
Yeah. Well, I think what's happening is I think there's a lot of people who are very heartsick at what they're seeing with the government because, you know, there are rules. If President Trump wants to, you know, start a war after 60 days, he must go to Congress and authorize it. It's a rule. And the rule is there so that a president can't make a unilateral move on his own. And then you hear, well, there's a ceasefire, so we don't have to come. It's like, and then the ceasefire gets broken and it's like, oh, well, no, we don't have to go. It's like, no, 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 no. There's a rule and you have to, I think what when you talk about 1976 and 1980, there was still a love for the country because we did follow the rules. Even remember when George Bush beat Al Gore, and Al Gore so as such a good citizen, he came up and said, "I lost. I I wish him well. This is our system. This is how it works." And people were like, yes, we might disagree, but we are one people. I think that's what's gone away from the administration's part is like, no, 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 no. We don't care about the rules. We are going to do what we want to do, and the laws are not going to get in our way. And I think that's what's causing people to be very unsettled because they know we can disagree. It's okay to disagree. It is not okay to break the rules that we've all agreed to live by. And I think that's where people are starting to being very unsettled. And I think that's where, I'm starting to, contact my congressman and say, hey, you know, you need to really think about how you're approaching governance, you know, because what we're doing isn't and is not getting us to where I think the founders really wanted us to get to.
Mm, very well said. So how did you get into writing and writing books? And what's the hardest part about writing? Because I've had multiple authors on my podcast, and they talk about one word, and it begins with a D. It's called discipline. You got to have a discipline to write, right?
Yes, I think for me, that's not an issue because what I am not a typical writer, I would say. What I do is I'm a thinker. And when I have something important for me to say that I haven't seen in the world, I'm like, oh, I need to write this down. And so then I will write a book. That's how I do it. I don't I have written one fiction book or two fiction books and two nonfiction books, it's because I have something important to say. So, and then when I'm so excited, I'm addicted to writing. I'm just like, I can't wait to get started and to go and do it and blah 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 blah. I think the hardest thing for me is sometimes between my brain and my fingertips where I'm typing is an eternity and I can't get the thought in my head down fast enough before another thought's coming in and another thought's coming in and it's just like, oh, slow down, stop, to figure out how to get all the things I want to say and then put them in the right order, so I think the hardest thing for me is the constant editing and making sure that I read or I look with my reader's mind in place so that I say, will a reader understand this? Is it in the right order? Is there a hole someplace? What's going on? I think that's the hardest part for me.
One of the things about your writing is you challenge readers to reconsider the foundations of human existence by examining the intricate tapestry of life that predates us. So,
Mhm.
you know, our history, our, human survival or human history, it's come a long way. What would you talk about that's challenging the reader of your books about that?
I think I start with some science and I try really hard because, you can't understand nature without understanding some biology or some chemistry or some physics. And I start back from the Big Bang. But what I try to do is make it in very approachable language, approachable examples. I try to tell jokes that are probably bad dad jokes I'm sorry, mom jokes, that are just like, ladies, stop, But I want people to realize that there's nothing to be afraid of, to to think through this. It's not hard. It's just, and you don't have to remember everything I say, because every time I refer back, I will bring it back and say, so this is how this works. This is the parallel. This is the connection. But I think it's really important for people not to be afraid to understand the world they live in. And it really doesn't have to, you don't have to be a super duper detailed scientist to understand this. I think somebody wrote me and said, geez, if I would have had this book in high school, chemistry and biology, I would have passed. Yeah, you know, because you don't, you know, to understand things, you don't need huge amounts of detail, but you need context and you need to see there's a story. Life has a story, and I want to tell you that story.
When I was getting ready for this, I wrote down decades, 20, 30, 40, 50 years about like when we was talking about flip phones and 8-track tapes.
Yep.
And when you
Yep.
look back at our lives, it's like each decade is its own chapter. Each year is its own chapter. And I look back and I was like, wow, what was I doing 30 years ago or 40 years ago?
Right.
And when you look
Right.
back, we learn from our failures, but we also learn the hard knocks of life. I hate that term, but I say it anyway. We fail, but it's amazing how we get through life, and then we always learn and we get better and better. And then I'll look back to some of the things that happened in my life, and I'm thankful it happened because I wouldn't be where I am today.
Right. Well, and I think that's one of the things that's very different about humans, because we can choose which ideas to follow. We aren't, I think of like the dinosaurs when the meteor hit. They had no capability of handling with their DNA. They were huge, I mean, monsters. They'd been around 100 million years, but they didn't. 100 million years. Think of that. We've been here, humans, 200,000. They've been there 100 million years. And when that meteor hit, they were not able, their DNA was not able to adjust, and they died. And yet, when we make a mistake, we can be like, oh, that was stupid. I'm not going to do that again. And I will then learn from that and become better and better and better. Do you see the difference between humans and life? They don't get to do that. They are stuck with the environment that they're given and the DNA that they have, and they don't get to make that adjustment. But we do. That's why we accelerate change so quickly, and we do so many amazing things. But we can also, again, do some really bad things at the same time. For the same reason, we could say, well, I didn't make enough money on there. Let me cut the quality of this product again. And I can do it in a bad way too. That's the double-edged sword of humans.
So I don't want to put you on the spot. What do you think are some of the biggest achievements in the last century or 150 years of our existence, like achievements, inventions that have really made us go this, really fast into the future as far as how we live?
Well, I think one of the big one, because it just dramatically was the printing press. Because that allowed the written word to be accessed by anybody. That changed. So all of a sudden, a podunk kid in the middle of rural England could read something and get an idea and invent something. I mean, it just accelerated. So I think that was really huge. I think the development of the computer, the ability to store information the way we do now is what it is. Because, DNA is nothing but information. And our ideas are funny because they're information, but they're not physical at all. But when you create a computer where you have the ability to store information the way we do and then transfer it, that's huge. And I'm sure back in the day when we had floppy disks and
Yeah.
we thought, 200 megabytes was huge. Nothing will ever get bigger than this. Ooh. And look at us today. I mean, just the ability to it's hard to say that there's one invention because it's a string of inventions from time immemorial when people started making alphabets and writing down to satellites today. But you can see where some things switch the culture dramatically. And honestly, I think social media is the thing that's switching our culture, and we are not really realizing it right now. And I think that is changing how children, in fact, interact with each other. The other big thing I think that's coming is AI. And it's really interesting because when you look at life, the definition of life and DNA is that it's protected, it can absorb, it can consume resources, and it can procreate,
Hmm.
right? That's what it does. And that's how, even though the thing dies, the line goes on, right? And humans, we do the same thing. AI has the potential to become a new life form that doesn't need to procreate. If it can give itself, find itself in a separate environment where it is protected, and it can consume the resources it needs or figure out how to make the resources it needs to. And in this case, it's not a body. It might need parts. But if AI can figure out how to supply its own parts and its own energy and everything else, it's a life form. It doesn't even need to procreate. It doesn't have to make a baby AI thing. It just has to live forever. And it becomes a new life form. And then humans have created a fourth level, an ecosystem above even humans.
Hmm.
That is something that may come. I don't I don't know where it's going. I would say we're still young, but I think human brains are relatively young in the picture, but we've already so accelerated our rate of change that we are now on the cusp of creating a new life form that we won't be able to control. You can't control other life forms. You can't.
Yeah, go back to that movie I, Robot with Will Smith in the mid
Yes.
2000s and some other
Yep.
war games in the early
Yes.
80s.
Yeah.
Those are
Yep.
just some off the top of my head that I can think of as far as movies. And there's a movie out now with, a AI image of Val Kilmer in it. I don't remember the name of the movie, but I saw something last week about it. And you can't even tell that it looked like really Val Kilmer. He passed away last year. And I've always said, like, when our actors are long gone, they're going to make AI movies of all the actors with different, like, I said, they're going to make a Terminator 20 with Betty Davis and Arnold Schwarzenegger someday. They're going to make one with that. They're going to do that.
Well, they can take all the writings of Aristotle and Isaac Newton and some of these brilliant scientists and put them all together and let AI go to town and see what they come up with. That's where I'm interested. I'm like, yeah, I want to be on that round table and see what's going on there and what they come up with, given, put all the knowledge of the world into it, plus these guys and the way they thought about the world and how they were able to produce such amazing ideas. I mean, Aristotle, I was like, boy, that guy's brilliant, and uh, let's see what happens. But I don't know. But I do think there is the potential that it could become its own life form, and AI would be able to, then self they would be able to do their own thing, and live independently. And then I don't know what happens then. I don't know where it goes, but I know things evolve and will keep evolving. And they will then figure out that the thing is AI will have to figure out what its prime objective is. You know, life, the prime objective is to survive. Humans, unfortunately, the prime directive right now is accumulate as many resources as you can before you die. And then you can't take them with you anyway, but so what? We're going to do that anyway. And then AI is going to have to figure out what its prime directive is. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and watch War Games. That I'm gonna because that computer in that movie was taking over. I got to watch that movie again. I haven't
Yeah.
seen it in
Well,
many,
it
many.
would be interesting to do so with all your knowledge about what we've been doing with AI and see how it resonates with you. There was a couple. I remember a Black Mirror episode, and Black Mirror is a interesting show. I don't know if you've watched episodes where they look at dystopia from that results from technology. And I will tell you, there was a episode about AI taking over and you know kind of shooting at people, and this guy was just trying to get a stuffed bunny for his daughter for her birthday, and he had to go into some warehouse and find the bunny and take it, and he was like getting shot at by the AI guys, and it was like, this is really This is horrible.
So Anne Riley's been my guest on this episode. She's authored The Human Idea. And Anne, this has been a fascinating conversation about how we've evolved and just things that are going on. And I can't thank you enough for being. I would like to have you back on to talk more about this. This was awesome.
I would love to. Anytime you want to have a chat, I'd love to, and we can narrow it down and talk about. We didn't even talk about. Sometimes I'm on a podcast, they talk just about the government decisions that you would make differently if you live this way. But we can. I'd love to. It'd be great. And I have just had such a good time. You ask really good questions,
Well,
and I've been really. It's been fun to chat about this.